Welcome to Bedtime Stories, presented by Vanishing Trails Podcast, a show that wanders the dark side of Yellowstone National Park. These are campfire-style tales based around real places and inspired by whispers of histories, but told for those drifting off under the stars or under the covers. Each story in this series is a complete journey, from eerie, grounded storytelling, all set within Yellowstone National Park. Subscribe to Vanishing Trails Podcast wherever you listen into your podcast, and join us each week as we explore real-life experiences, unsolved mysteries, haunting landscapes, and, well, the dark corners of our great nation's national parks. Now, close your eyes and settle in, and let the wilderness speak. Jason Hollows has spent more than a decade in the backcountry of Yellowstone, and all that time he had never feared being alone in the woods. A wildlife biologist by trade, Jason specialized in tracking apex predators. He knew the patterns of wolves, the scar patterns on the grizzlies that circled the Lamar Valley, and the migrating seasons of elk and bison through the geysers. But the Thorofare was different. Set deep in the southeast corner of Yellowstone, it was a remote stretch of land in the lower 48. Number roads and number stations, and with no cell service, you walk in and you hike out. And that's if you make it out. Now, Jason had become a regular here, as he normally came down to study wolves, or, in this case, more specifically, why a pack that had ranged for years through the Yellowstone highlands had stopped using a section of their range near the Trident Plateau and was now knee-deep in the Thorofare. The collars on the wolves had pinged inconsistencies, and one by one their signals gone dark. First, the alpha female, then the two juveniles, followed by the elders, and then nothing. At first, it looked like a typical run-of-the-mill battery failure, but Jason had collar data going back over 10 years with no battery change, and he knew the rhythms. These hadn't just failed. Something just turned them off. Now, Jason hiked in through the south entrance trailhead, crossing the Snake River and pushing east past the Shoshone Geyser Basin, until he was deep in the Thorofare's network of drainages and canyons. No sign of bear, no sign of wolves, no sign of birds, just the wind and his thoughts. 3 days in, he reached the edge of an old forest burn near the Black-tailed Deer Plateau. His GPS showed that he was close to the last pings of the alpha wolf's collar, so he set up camp near a thicket of fallen spruce. That night, as he made notes by lantern light, he heard something that he hadn't expected. Not howling, not rustling, but breathing. Heavy and deliberate, just on the edge of his camp. Jason scanned the tree line with his flashlight, and nothing, not even eye shine, but the sound continued. And then it stopped. Jason, normally someone who doesn't get too thrown off guard, didn't sleep that night, as he was just perplexed. What was breathing on the edge of his camp? The next morning, he found something worse than tracks. Elk bones, arranged in a pattern, cleaned, stripped, and laid out in a spiral. And in the center of this spiral was one of the wolf's collars, smashed to pieces. And predators just don't do that. Jason marked the coordinates and realized something was off. And as he did, he considered turning back, but the scientist in him was hooked. And that night, he moved deeper into Yellowstone's Forgotten Zone, near Bridger Lake. Nestled in the crook between the Trident Plateau and the South Arm, that's where he found a cabin, which was not on any map. It was weathered, half-sunken, covered in soot and moss, with no trail leading to it. There was no sign of life anywhere to be seen. And inside the cabin was just filled with bones, dozens, maybe hundreds, strung together like charms. Some animal, some human. And Jason backed out slowly, and as he did, he spotted the movement in the trees, pale, barefoot, watching. He moved quickly back toward his camp, but the forest didn't feel the same. It was quieter, denser, and the scent of wood smoke and iron. And that night when Jason got to his camp, they came. Not wolves, not bears, people. At first, it sounded like whispers carried by the wind, and Jason saw the glow of torches through the trees with figures emerging, faces covered in bark and ash and bones tied into their hair. Their eyes, oh God, their eyes were empty, unblinking. And well, Jason did what he was always told not to do in situations like these. He ran. Leaving his gear, he sprinted through the forest with no moon and no trail. He didn't stop until dawn, and when he finally emerged near the Yellowstone River, he collapsed, shivering and covered in scratches from the brush he ran through. A ranger on patrol luckily found him 2 days later, disoriented, dehydrated, and clutching the broken wolf collar as if it was his last lifeline. And Jason never went back. Though he filed his report, his notes were sealed. Officially, the wolf pack migrated. Their collars had just failed. And according to the reports, Jason Hollows suffered a psychological break brought on by isolation and exhaustion. But Jason knew what he saw. There are people in the Thorofare that even the wolves avoid. And if you ever hike into that deep, thick country and find bones laid in circles, turn back, because they're still there, and they're still watching. Thanks for listening to Bedtime Stories, presented by the Vanishing Trails Podcast. If you like tonight's story, subscribe to Vanishing Trails wherever you get your podcast, where you'll find true stories of disappearances, strange encounters, and the darker side of Yellowstone and all of America's national parks. And until next time, sleep well, and remember, don't stray off the trail.